Here we are, chapter 6, and this is the first lesson, 6.1. Chapter 6 is all about functions, and 6.1, we're going to be talking about relations and functions. So we're still talking about ordered pairs, the way that we can express those, the representations of them. So we're still talking about graphs, ordered pairs, x, y. So here we go. Your learning target is I can use a mapping diagram. That's a new vocabulary word for you, to describe the relationship between the sets of inputs and outputs. So I'm going to tell you what all that means. First, let's talk about our vocabulary words. Relation, inputs, outputs, mapping diagram. You actually kind of already know what all of this stuff is. We're just using new words to describe things. So here we go. X and Y are going to be our inputs and outputs. So we've called them points on a graph or ordered pairs. And now X and Y can be described as inputs and outputs. So in blue there it says X is input, and in red it says Y is output. So you just have to think of, like, if you're writing an ordered pair X, Y, you write your X first. It's in alphabetical order. So when you're going in somewhere, like an input, it's first. Output comes second. That's the Y. That's kind of a way you can remember it. So we're just calling X input and Y output. So take a look at these ordered pairs, 0, 1, 1, 2, and 2, 4. Notice in blue, 0, 1, and 2, those are our inputs because they're our X values. Okay, so remember X's are our inputs. So all those X's in those ordered pairs are the input values. And here's our Y values, 1, 2, and 4. And you just have to remember that Y is the output. So we're just calling X input, Y output. Okay, so if we were to list them, if big ideas, or if I ask you to list the inputs and list the outputs, you would look at your ordered pairs, and for your inputs, you would just list what every X value is with a comma in between. And for your Y's or your outputs, you would list all of the Y values with commas in between. So if I go back to those ordered pairs, well, I could use this one. We have 0, 1, 1, 2, and 2, 4. So notice that just the X values are listed for the inputs and just the Y values are listed for the outputs. Okay, a relation. What's a relation? Think about in real life. What is a relation or a relationship, right? It's kind of a way to describe how things relate to each other. So a relation can pair inputs and outputs together, and we look at how the inputs and outputs, how does one affect the other? How does the input affect the output? Okay, so here's our inputs that we were using before, 0, 1, 2, and our outputs or our Y's 0, 2, 4. You have to think of them as like going into a function machine. So the inputs go into the little machine, that 0, 1, and 2 individually go in. Then there's some sort of rule or something that happens to the input, and then boop, it comes out as the output, and it's changed in some sort of way. Not always, but in this case it does, because when we input 0, well, the output's 0. When we input 1, we got 2. And when we input 2, we got 4. So some sort of rule is happening there. Ooh, I don't want to play that. So let me escape and go to the next. We're going to watch that together as a class. So I just want to take a look at this last slide here. When you have an input and output, we can use a mapping diagram to represent the input and output values. That's what these are called. These, they look like rectangles with, sort of curved corners. These are called mapping diagrams. So you notice that number 1 says input, and it says 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Those are our input values. And then we make a separate box for our output, 5, 6, 7, and then we don't know what's happening. The arrows mean when when we input 1, we get 5 for our output. When we input 2, we got 6 for the output. When we input 3, we got 7 for the output. So we have to think, what was the rule? What happened to the 1 to make it 5? From the 2 to make it 6. So there's something happening in that function machine. And we have to think, well, how do you get from 1 to 5? I guess you could add 4. Okay, let's see if it works for 2. 2, so 1 plus 4 is 5. What about 2 plus 4? Yep, that's 6. What about 3 plus 4? Yep, that's 7. What about 4 plus 4? So the next number would be 8. I'm starting to see a pattern here. 5, 6, 7, 8. I have a hunch that my next value will be 9 and then 10. So let's do it. 5 plus 4, yep, 9. Ooh, I could even write these down, guys. Watch this. I could write plus 4. It's hard to write with a mouse. Plus 4, plus 4. And then 4 plus 4 is going to be 8. Hard to draw with that. And then 5 plus 4 is going to be 9. 6 plus 4 is 10. So we have our input values. Then we wrote the little rule in the middle. We don't always have to write that there, but I just did to show you what was happening to the inputs to get our outputs in this. And this whole thing, the input output with the 2 boxes and the arrows and the input values and the output values, it's called a mapping diagram. And we'll do number 2 together as a class.